You're listening to Read the Damn Book, and this is episode number 8. Welcome to Read the Damn Book podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, where I read every book of every author that I interview on this show. This is a spinoff of the Webby-nominated My Simplified Life podcast, where we go behind the scenes. I don't just want to hear about the book. I want to hear about the author, the human being behind the words that we all fall in love with. Here, you're going to hear directly from the authors what their journey through life has been like, their journey through writing their book, and some behind the scenes on every book. So let's get started and read the damn book. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today, I am talking to anthropologist and author Danilyn Rutherford. Her new book, Beautiful Mystery, is out today, and she takes us on the journey of what it is like to be the mother of Millie, her daughter. Her daughter has an undiagnosed disability. She is nonverbal, and yet she has a communication all of her own. It is a language that Danilyn speaks. It is a language that her caregivers understand, and it shows you what a human being is and how they can converse to you, how they are a real person, what their likes and dislikes are, and the importance in making sure that we protect them through the services we provide as a state, as a country, as well as to the caregivers who are there day in and day out. So I encourage you to listen to this interview. You are going to learn so much, and I know that you're going to fall in love with Millie too. Hi, Danilyn.
Hi, Michelle.
I'm so happy to finally meet you. I feel like I know you because I've read your book, so I feel more stalkerish than usual.
That's awesome. It's actually Danilyn.
Danilyn, I'm sorry. I should have asked you
It's my
before.
beloved mother and my beloved great-grandfather combined their names, so she was Marilyn. Anyway.
Danilyn, I am sorry. Well, that is a flub up. So there we go, everybody.
No. But despite that, which doesn't bother me at all, I'm incredibly honored and grateful to be here and just grateful you read my damn book, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Sure. My name is Danilyn Rutherford. I am an anthropologist. I'm currently the president of the Wenner-Gren Foundation for Anthropological Research. Before starting there, I taught at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and at the University of Chicago, and briefly at Goldsmiths College in London. And I just wrote a book that's about my life with my daughter. So
And
that's
it's
kind of
called
why I'm
Beautiful
here.
Mystery, and it is a beautiful book.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you.
So let's talk about your daughter, Millie.
Okay.
Because and this is funny. So I am reading everywhere I go. There's usually always a book in my hand. My husband makes fun of me because I read while I'm cooking. I read on the soccer field. And there was a mom and an aunt who approached me this week saying, what book, what is it good? What are you reading? And it was your book. And I was explaining a bit about it. And I said, I'm not all the way through. I'm done now, everybody. But at the time I said, I'm not all the way through, but her daughter, Millie, has been undiagnosed, and I don't know if she is. And they asked about her symptoms, and it turned out that they have a sister with Rett syndrome.
Yes.
And it sparked a whole conversation. I'm like, well, then you probably should read the book. I don't know if that's what she has, but here we go.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I mean, Rett syndrome, she was tested for every which way and never came back positive. The other thing that she sort of looks like is Angelman syndrome, which again, tested every which way. But she has a great neurologist now, just a wonderful person, and he's encouraged me to give it another try because the last time I had tested, they weren't doing full genome sequencing. So his theory is it's Rangelman syndrome because she looks a little like Rhett's, a little like Angelman's. But yeah, just to say something about what Millie's like, I mean, I'll start with just what she's like now. She's 25 years old, 5 foot tall, beautiful long legs, long fingers. She has, a little like pixie haircut, smooth skin, freckles, lots of fun. She can walk, but with someone helping support her, so she has balance. She needs help eating. She can't really hold a spoon. She has pretty high support needs, but she's also really delightful. she's out horseback riding right now, as it were, and they use a lift to get her on the horse, and one person stands on one side and the other stands on the other side, which she just loves. But, she loves straps and strings. And when you approach her, because she doesn't use her vision in the way that most people do, if you say, "Hi, Millie," at first it seems like she's not really paying attention to you. And then when it dawns on you whose voice it is, or dawns on her, it'll be like she'll give you a little smile. So sometimes you feel like you really, really connect with her. And sometimes she's in her own world and it's just a mystery, again, what she's actually thinking about. And that's kind of what led me to write this book in a way, right? Is that experience of being with someone I felt really close to, but, to a degree, I think more than we're used to, we assume we know what's going on in other people's minds. My daughter really reminded me that we actually never do, and in
Mm.
her case, it's taken a lot of creativity and curiosity, for me and the people who spend time with her to just kind of sort of figure her out, and she still surprises us. She surprises us when she does things we used to think were unintentional and they're actually, no, I just don't like this flavor of food, and she surprises us in other ways too. So that's kind of what I wanted to capture in the book. Yeah. I
The
mean,
opening just alone where you talk about this other woman who during COVID, she had COVID, she was hospitalized, and the doctors and the medical staff treated her as, well, she's nonverbal, she's
yeah,
disabled, so, like,
yeah.
kinda no big deal. And it shook me, and then her caregivers who were outside of this medical team all said, "Well, no, we communicate with her, and there's a different form of communication." And it really to open the book that way, it struck me as, "Oh, you really have to spend time with this individual to get to know them and to create a language of your own."
Right, or to figure out their language. It's interesting.
Yes.
She's had speech therapy all along, and speech therapy is a little bit out of the box, It's like,
Mhm.
okay, we do this with nonverbal people, we do this with partially verbal people. It's very, but finally she had a speech therapist, post school who I went to, who was just like, no, what the point is we need to figure out how Millie is communicating. And it looks to me, after meeting with her, a few times, it's like Millie is very creative. And I was kind of like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like, it's not that she's not connecting, it's that you have to be curious and open to sort of like figuring that out. And that was what moved me so much in that story. It's like, in a sense, we think of really vulnerable people as a way not having any agency, not having any force in the world. But in fact, when you look at people like my daughter, they create entire social worlds around them, from people who have a reason to want to connect with them. So, that's kind of really key, I think, to the story too. Yeah, so I'm glad that you hit upon that because I think that's so important. It's like story's anthropological. I'm like, what did I learn as an anthropologist? It's very personal. It's like, how's my life unfolded, but it's also meant to be political on some level. It's like how much we do in our society around, this sort of assumption around who gets to count as a person and who doesn't, who gets to count and who doesn't. So I'm really glad, like I said, that you hit upon the story of Sarah McLachlan, because I think it was such an important story, to be shared.
And talking about the people and the socialization that come together, you touch on so many of the caregivers that work with Millie, and you just get this feeling of how close they feel to her. And then going back to your article that you wrote in August that
Yeah,
I sent, just so everybody knows, we're in the same district in California. I'm going to educate you all on this. So we have the same Congressman, Jimmy Panetta, who
yeah,
I sent your article to him because of the big bullshit bill, how that affects people who were having assistance through the government. And that would
yeah,
be exactly Millie. That would
yeah,
be her caregivers, on top
yeah,
of the fact that these are individuals who might not be here legally or in the system, and how we are chasing them away from
yes.
this person who needs not only the caregivers, but the assistance so desperately. It's all political.
It's totally political. And it's crazy. Like, we are really fortunate. Like, I mean, I think that's one of the messages of the book. It's like we live a really happy life together, you know. But at the same time, like, we are kind of in a space where you just see how vulnerable people are being made because they care about other people's vulnerability, right? And it's
Yes.
like all of these caregivers, 1 in 10 home health aides is undocumented, right? 40% are actually receiving services themselves. It's like this is a very low income community caring for what is often a low income community, and the fact that we don't appreciate that care is a problem for the entire species, that's not kind of at the center of our political considerations. I think that's just deeply, deeply problematic, and yeah, you look demographically at what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe, other parts of the world. The aging population is growing. Who is going to care for people and how we treat them? That's just a crucial question for our time. So, yeah, Millie gives you an example that allows people to understand or imagine what her life, what the life of someone like her is like, both how rich and beautiful it is, but how incredibly fragile it is too, because we are so dependent on the government support, to kind of
Hmm.
make a life together, right? Yeah. So I think about this a lot. Uh, yeah, yeah,
There's a lot for you to think about as a mom who, going back, you lost your husband when Millie was 3,
yeah.
eh,
That's right.
which in and of itself is very hard. I lost my father when I was 7. So I know that
Yeah,
as a child, that's very hard. As a parent, that's very hard. You've lost your spouse. Now
mm,
it's even more hard because you are taking care of this child on top of your son, Ralph. There's 2 kids,
yes,
like one is a lot, one who's disabled is a lot. And now you've got 2 kids, you've lost your husband,
yeah,
and you're going through all of this on your own, trying to figure it out. And then it dawns on you that you won't be around forever.
yes,
And that's
yes,
got to be so hard to think
yes,
we never want to leave this earth. I do not want to die.
yeah,
I want to see my children go through life,
yeah,
but then to think about what happens to them when you're gone, when they
yeah.
are helpless per se.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I mean, I have conversations with other parents all the time, and it's like, how many conversations do you have? Like, hey, when I'm dead, it's like we don't like to think about that, and in a sense, when I think about this book, the book is in a way written for who I am now, from the perspective of who I am now to that person who was in her 40s when all of this happened, right? Because you kid yourself, you think that you have a trajectory through life and you think your kids have a trajectory, right? Like for Ralph was going to go to college and row crew like I rode crew, you know, and go on and have like a particular kind of career, right? And that's not what's happened with him. But with Millie, I couldn't even tell a story. It's sort of like, it's really, really difficult when you're just coming to terms with the fact that your kid is going to be really different. I mean, I think part of the point of the story is like people thought that Millie was a tragedy, and there's this whole thing, what to expect when you're expecting, the milestones that your kid is supposed to pass. You take your kid to the playground, everyone looks at your kid, they compare with their kids. I always just had this feeling like I was just an object of pity, right?
Hmm.
But it's like, I actually know what tragedy is, losing the person who talked you into having children to begin with, who you've been with since you were basically like litter mates in college. That's tragedy, right? And part of the point of the story is Millie is, part of what has gotten me through this tragedy. And not just Millie, it's the entire world of people around her. So I think that was a process of Craig dying, I own a poodle, right? And poodles are pack animals. There's like the pack, the immediate kind of owners and surrounding, and then there's the rest of the world that they bark at. I've never been much of a barker, but I definitely had that. Like, there's my little pack, there's my husband, there's my children, and they're like my sources of support. And losing Craig so suddenly when my kids were so young one of the things that made me appreciate is there are all sorts of people already in my life, who are here for us. I just need to reach out. And, that's kind of the trajectory of the book. It starts with me, it's very kind of intimate. But by the end, there's a whole flock, and it's really about the flock. It's about Millie's entire world. It's not just about me. So, in a sense, all memoirs are like a bunch of really crappy things happened to me and I survived and I'm better for it. you know? I'm not sure I'm better for it, but I survived. And in part, that's thanks to the world that my daughter has created around
I want
herself.
to come live in your commune in the backyard.
Yeah. So we are having a book party. The flock is invited. so, and you see, I have piles of books behind me. They're all going to get a freebie if they're in the book.
I
So,
love it. Oh, I love it. I
yeah.
have to tell you that I didn't cry until the very end. And the part that made me cry, if you're interested, is when you go
Yes.
back to Chicago.
Yes.
So I've lived in Chicago too, but when
Yeah.
you're in this Uber, the Lyft, and the driver starts telling you that she used to be a teacher, and you share that Millie went to these schools, and she goes, I know Millie. I remember Millie. I
Ah,
just got goosebumps again. It makes me want to tear up because that was the point that you went, "Oh, she made an impact on these people over a decade ago who carry this person with them."
yes.
I can't even describe it. As a
Yes.
mom for someone last night, my fourth grade daughter, her teacher sent a message. It was 9 o'clock at night, and she said, "I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that your daughter participates and she shows up, and she's just such a pleasure." And I went, "Oh, she took time out of her day. It's 9 o'clock at night. She didn't need to do
Yes.
this."
Yes.
And that it struck me as these people who are caring for our children, who
Yes.
then carry them also with them.
Exactly. Oh my God. It's crazy. And part of the fun of finally getting this book published is, I had a full draft of it and I reached out to everyone I mentioned in it, whether it was by name or simply as a group of people. And some people I could reach, some people's emails have changed. Some people I've been in touch with forever. Marilyn, who's in the book, has been in our life since 2009 when we moved to Santa Cruz, right? She's kind of like my mom, but then there are other people too who I hadn't been in touch with, and they were so delighted to be back in touch, and part of it is it's just Millie. They really want to see Millie again. So those relationships are so incredibly important. And I think just in general, as human beings, we don't spend enough time thinking about all of the people who people our world, right?
Mhm.
There's a way in which you're forced to be really like, "Oh, these are the primary relationships and these ones kind of don't matter." It all matters. And I feel like that's a really important lesson from this book. And it matters even if we don't really know those people or completely understand them, because that's kind of the other lesson of the book is you can be close to people without thinking you can kind of get inside their head, right? And
Yeah.
right, that idea of appreciating the separateness and the difference of people and still being close to them and appreciating that closeness as like a key feature of your life. That's something it was a lesson I was in a way able to learn because of the way Craig left us. I kind of got
Yeah.
myself rebooted in certain sorts of ways, but it's definitely a lesson I've carried forward. And I think it's a really important one for our times, I have to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. We're such a hot mess. It's between
No.
COVID and then politics, and we
Oh,
couldn't be more
yeah.
divided right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I followed your advice. You have a website where and I'm a first time podcast person, right? And so it's like, what should I do to prepare? It's like, listen to some episodes. I listened to your great conversation with Terrence Lester, and I was like,
Ah,
yeah, so much of that.
I
I
adore him.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, no, that was just fantastic. What he had to say about he's traveling across the country and people are doing all sorts of like violently racist things to him. And how do you come out of that and not just be angry? It's like, no, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to understand that this is not the only thing to know about this person. And I feel like anthropologists, I can't help thinking as an anthropologist, it's just you turn into one. But one of the things that we know as people who study people is like we all carry around stories in our heads. There's stories about us, there's stories about other people. And some of the stories are like they're just practical. Like you go into a bank, you know how the ATM machine works. It does predictable things. Or you meet up with, have interaction with your mailman, it's like, or your mail carrier, your person. You just have that normal interaction. You know, but there's a way in which those stories can be just super detrimental if they prevent you from being curious about where people are at, what their experience is, what they're going through. It doesn't mean you need to condone evil behavior. People sometimes misunderstand that about anthropology. That's not what it's about. But you do need to try to understand because we're not going to be able to make the world better unless we understand why people are doing the things they're doing. So, yeah, that just really resonated with me, his conversation, what he was saying, and also just what he was saying about the importance of actually spending time and walking in the shoes of all of the people who are so incredibly disadvantaged in this world. And again, that's something that Millie's high care needs, right? High support needs. The system I've been put into, I can end up spending an afternoon sitting in the local health department, waiting for someone to have time to talk to me alongside all these people who can't afford to be taking this time off. And we're putting people through these incredibly humiliating experiences to just get paltry support. I just think it's really important for people to learn to think about what
I
it would be
completely
like to
agree.
walk in
It's
someone else's
no,
shoes.
no, it's that whole empathy thing.
Sorry, I'm surmising, but
Which I fully believe in.
yeah,
And it's
totally.
you bring up a great point of like wanting to know
Yeah,
why. And I find that I'm on this quest to understand why. And yet I grapple with the how do you figure out the why? Why do you act this way? Because I don't understand it.
yeah,
And I'm not even sure some people understand why they're
yeah,
acting this way. So as an anthropologist, I'm very curious, like, why
no,
are they
no,
acting this way? Please tell me.
yeah, no, it's crazy. And you can say all sorts of things about what kinds of thoughts and behavior get licensed at any particular moment. I think that there's a way in which I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speculate this because it's not my field, but it's like the way that the media works, the way social media works. It's just like all of these shorthands, like, you know, we don't kind of take time to really think about, all of the different forces and factors that shape someone's life. And some of them are contingent, but it's like, do you give people an opportunity for things that might be really traumatic for them to express themselves in the form of violence and hate? Are the sort of forms out there? And, are there models out there that make it thinkable to do the things that people, seem to be doing? So, yeah, I don't know. There are all sorts of forces. And then there's just like, there are incentives built into our society that reward kinds of behavior that are really problematic. I mean, I think, again, I have a friend, Dagmar Herzog, who's a really excellent historian of Germany, who has a book that just came out on the euthanasia killings. I mean, not everyone knows this, but before, the Germans basically tested out their gas chambers on disabled people, that like hundreds of thousands of people like my daughter were killed, right? And if you look at the rationale for that, it was like these people are so expensive. It costs so much to take care of them, right? They're not happy. How could they possibly be happy being who they are, right? So on the one hand, this very economistic way of thinking about what benefit for society looks like. On this other way, this inability to imagine being different from yourself, it's like this has lethal consequences. And there's the quote from, Donald Trump that, I think a bunch of people maybe have seen, right? It's reported by his nephew who has a son, who's disabled. It's like the shape they're in, all the expenses. Maybe these kinds of people should just die. There is this sort of real eugenic undertone in our society, and part of it has to do
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
capitalism, just to name it. And part of it has to do with just this inability to put yourselves in the position of someone else. So it's funny, I've been thinking a lot about the book. I'm always like, Millie is so happy. But then it's like, Millie is not always happy. And that's something I'm trying to write something about that just because I think that's really interesting, that we make these assumptions, right? Either we assume people are miserable. I mean, most people assume people are miserable all the time. I'm miserable, she's miserable, everyone's miserable. you know? And sort of in reaction against that, we're like, no, she's happy. But she
Right.
doesn't have to be happy all the time. What 20-something young woman is happy all the time? I don't
What
know.
any human being is happy all the time.
I know, that's just insane. But that just goes to show that even though it seems like, the 1930s, 1940s are a long way away, that shadow is still with us.
Hmm.
Yeah, so Millie has a volunteer job. She goes horseback riding. She goes to dances. I love all of this. It's great. But part of it is this impulse like, oh, she's just like everyone else. It's like
Mm.
this reassuring thing. If she's not just like everyone else, we can't recognize her as a person. So I think that's like something that people who are not in our position maybe don't understand. So when you have, lawmakers talking about how Medicaid is so expensive, we need to cut, there's a lot of corruption. They're imagining, this thing, all of a sudden people are sitting around at home, like eating cookies or something. It's
Yeah.
like, no, it's this funding is incredibly important to keep people alive. And when you go down the route of like, oh, they're really expensive, then you go down the route of what's their life worth? Are they really people? Maybe they're not. This is kind of taking us back to the 1930s. And when I was writing the book, it felt like extreme to be saying this, because thanks to brave disability, justice and rights advocates, especially here in California, we have pretty good services. But then at the same time, I think that the current moment is just showing how fragile
Hmm.
that situation in fact is.
Yeah, I think our country as a whole, we are lucky to be in California, but the rest of the country,
Yeah.
I fear
Yeah.
for them, and it makes me fear for California that it could just be that little tipping point that we do
Yeah.
lose what we have. So we
Yeah.
have to be more cautious and
Yeah.
pay attention.
Yeah.
We can't take it for granted.
Yeah, and pay attention to everyone, like whatever. I'm incredibly privileged. Like I said, I'm lucky. I was thinking about the LA fires, the young man who died, and then also like there was the father and the son who died. And it's like the father was a wheelchair user, the son was a wheelchair user. They were depending on another son for their care. That son was in the hospital and there was no one with them. And that really didn't get written about. And they died because the other son, the brother who usually takes care of them both, was in the hospital, right? And wasn't there when the fires came. And, something that hasn't been talked about is the fact that this man was left alone with his son. When I meet other families, I'm like, what's your care situation? And for people who don't have a lot of resources, it's often just us. It's the family, the aging parents, right? So that trajectory where people stay with their aging parents until their parents can no longer lift them and do the personal care work, and then they end up in nursing homes. So I just think it's important at the same time as we're thinking about people like Millie, we're thinking about the entire population because Millie is pretty well off. And there are a lot of people who really aren't, and
Mhm.
again, that includes something I write about a little bit in the book. It's like that includes some of her caregivers. Like she has
Yeah.
caregivers who have disabled kids. She's had classmates who've never had any support from the state, and that's another way the system works. Massive budget cuts. They say we're not actually going to cut anyone, but then they're going to make people requalify every 6 months, which is a very difficult thing to do. So anyway, sorry, I'm not moving forward.
No, I'm so grateful that you are bringing light to all of this. That people can pay attention, they can read your story so that they can build that empathy and walk in your shoes, walk in Millie's shoes, start to recognize what more we need to do, why it's important to call your reps, why we need to make sure that healthcare continues and that it is not fully cut and gutted the way we're about to see, I
Yeah.
fear. So I'm grateful to you. Thank you for sharing your story. Can you
Oh.
share with everyone where they can connect with you and purchase Beautiful Mystery?
Well, I have the link. I actually now have a personal website for the first time in my life, danilynrutherford.com. And the book is available kind of everywhere now. It's, the launch date is just in a few days, or today, if that's
Yeah,
what
it will be
everybody
today. Yes.
The launch date is today. You can buy it at any of your favorite, hopefully local bookstores. Go to your local bookstore and order it, and any of the online distributors, and Duke University Press, which is the publisher.
Perfect. Thank you so
Right.
much. It was such a pleasure to meet you.
Really a pleasure to meet you, Michelle. And again, thank you so much for reading my book and inviting me to be on. I appreciate it deeply. Yeah.
As we are recording this interview, we are currently potentially at a government shutdown, and a lot of it is all around the healthcare system in our country. So I encourage you to pick up your phone, send an email, contact your representatives. Let them know that we cannot cut healthcare. We have millions of people in America who depend on these services. People like Millie, Millie's caregivers. This is why it is so important. I encourage you to learn more about Millie, to really educate yourself on the other human beings that are surrounding us, because we are all people in the very end. And I encourage you to go pick up a copy of Beautiful Mystery and go read the damn book.